Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Double Feature. Thank you so much for joining us here on this episode. This is an incredibly special episode, especially for me. This is a episode where we have a returning guest, Sean O'Connell. Now, you might remember Sean was one of our earlier guests. I believe he was the first big-ish guest. Our first guest was Robert Ballot, who is the lawyer behind the movie Dark Waters, but Sean was our first actual sort of movie insider guest, if that makes sense. Sean is the managing director of CinemaBlend, which is a huge movie website. They're fantastic. They've got a great reputation. They're not one of those sort of cheap movie scoop websites. They're actually incredibly reputable, and they're a great website. And Sean runs a podcast called Real Blend. And Real Blend, I'm a huge, huge fan of. I'm even, subscribed to their premium as well. Giving away my bucks. And he runs that podcast with two other hosts, Kevin and Jake. And they're fantastic. They have great banter, and what I talk about that show really, really positively because it really influences us here at Midnight Double Feature. You might have noticed, in the last few months we've been getting more and more guests on. That's because I'm truly, truly inspired by the work they do. I don't have movie sort of like connections or anything like that. They work in the industry and stuff like that. But I mean, their drive really gives me drive to hopefully get guests on for you guys. And just to kind of like, sit down and have the opportunity to pick their brain is awesome. So, thank you so much to Sean for giving me that inspiration and for boosting our podcast in terms of quality and, just for giving me drive. I really appreciate that. So Sean here is on to talk about his new book, which is called With Great Power. And it's all about Spider-Man. It's all about the movie history behind Spider-Man. There's things in there about the Marvel deal back in the late 90s. When Marvel sold their characters to specific studios. But not only that, there's a whole history of Spider-Man, including the franchise, being handed off to different filmmakers, and obviously where we are today with No Way Home, which, I still can't believe happened, which is wild. So, in essence, the book is like a big kind of like character piece. And Sean is a massive, massive Spider-Man nerd. So, I mean, I guess who better to cover that particular character? Sean's previous book was called Release the Snyder Cut, and that's what we talked about on our last episode, which I believe is episode 189. I might be incorrect. I should have done this research here. But, he makes for a great, great interview. And, for the first time ever, we're putting this video up for the public. So if you do want to see the video version of this episode, you can go check it out. It's on YouTube. But look, if you're also just wanting to listen to the podcast, that's here for you as well. But without any further ado, here's Sean O'Connell talking about his new book, With Great Power. Thank you so much, Sean, and enjoy, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Double Feature. This is a very special one. I'm here with Managing Director of CinemaBlend, returning guest of the show, Sean O'Connell. How you doing, man?
I'm great. Honored to be back. I really appreciate you having me.
Oh, it's my honor. The listeners know how much I love Real Blend. I pop in and out to Real Blend all the time. I'm a card-carrying member of Real Blend Premium.
Nice.
It's
very cool.
It's awesome, dude. You get an extra bonus episode, where they may or may not be spirited debates regarding Leonardo DiCaprio and Titanic.
The premium episodes have their own different feel to them. And, unintentionally, we still want to keep the same vibe going, but we tend to go down these tangents on the premium show that just leads to a lot of really fun conversations.
They're awesome. They're so laid back. And they're such a good time. Since the last time we had you on the podcast, which was July 2020, which feels like an age ago. Even though since the pandemic started, all time has become wonky. So July 2020 was when we had you. I feel like that was 15 years ago. But since that time, I wanted to ask you a real blind question before we do dive into the book.
Sure.
So since that time, Real Blend has absolutely launched into the stratosphere. I mean, since that date, you've spoken to Chris Nolan, Denis Villeneuve, Ridley Scott, Hans Zimmer, and Quentin Tarantino for a third time. I know you've been in the game for a while, but how do Kevin, Jake, and yourself steel yourselves and get ready to talk to these heavy hitters, man? Like, I mean, you've got to be nervous, surely.
For some of them, for some of them, but so much less so, to be honest with you, because you have the safety net of the other two guys backing you up, right? And so, if you're an individual going into an individual one-on-one interview, it's all on you. And I know in that scenario that if I whiff on a question, the next guy's going to, hopefully step up and hit a double at the very least. But we really prep hard for these interviews. We really try to get our questions flowing in a way that we think is going to trigger the right type of conversation. And what's really unusual and what works really well about the three of us is that whenever we come to the table with the questions that we have sort of prepared individually, they never really overlap. We all want to know different things about the movies that we're talking to the filmmakers about. And I think that sort of three-headed approach satisfies the filmmakers because they're getting to talk about so many different subjects. And it could go from something really technical like Kevin gets into to more the bigger picture type things that I like to ask about. And so, I don't know. We have found out that the chemistry we have as three of us interviewing different people together works well because of the way that we approach the subject matter.
No, it's awesome. I feel like it's lightning in a bottle. Like, it's one of those situations where you've brought together these three people, each have their own styles, and then you just kind of like mesh them together. And even the guests, dude, like when you hear the guests say, "Oh, that's a great question," or "That was a lot of fun." I mean, it genuinely feels like that they're 100% happy to be there, and that is. To me, I mean, like, I'm going to get to towards the end of the episode, I'm going to thank you because, I'm going to thank you right now. So, look, you were the first guest on the podcast back in July 2020, but since then, we've had some pretty decent people come through, like Fabian Wagner, who was a cinematographer for Game of Thrones and Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Legend.
The Nelms brothers who directed Fat Man.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, cool. I don't have the industry connections or anything like that. I just reach out to people via social media. But I think the drive definitely came from you guys. Like hearing you guys go after these big, I mean, like Nolan. I mean, yes, he was paired with Mr.
John
Washington.
David.
Yeah. So, but I mean, like, you got him on your show and you got him to say Dunkirk.
That will always stand out as my favorite accomplishment on this show.
Such a pinch me moment, for surely.
It's so stupid. I can't believe we even we were discussing that recently. I forget if it was on a show or in between it. And
it was on a show. I feel like I heard that recently.
And it fell to me to ask him. And like now that I think about it in hindsight, I have no clue why I had the balls to do that. And the fact that he, played along but didn't is great. Like that's just perfectly Nolan. And
awesome, dude.
It was very, very funny.
I'm excited to hear him back on when Oppenheimer comes around. So that's
and I hope we get more time. Like that one was kind of like a TV slot, like extended TV slot, paired. And paired. So we really do like to ask for 30 minutes because what you were saying too, which I find really interesting, and it is totally rewarding to us when somebody tells us that we've asked a good question. And but when we get these filmmakers, a lot of times they're in the publicity circuit and they're promoting whatever film that they're promoting. And it takes them 10 minutes to realize, oh, wait, I can have a conversation. Oh, wait, these guys, they don't know us, necessarily right off the bat. So they have to warm up to, oh, I'm not just in a normal standard junket interview. I can actually get into the nitty gritty with these guys. And so we often, when we sort of break down these interviews after the fact, we point to the moment where the director we're speaking to, or whoever the talent we're speaking to, settles down or opens up, because one of us has asked something that they didn't expect. And then they realize like, oh, cool, I can keep going. Like one of my favorites, I was just listening back to it kind of recently, and I don't listen to the show all that often. It was Joaquin Phoenix and him gelling with us after like the second or third question, and then really realizing like, oh, okay, this is going to be a good time. That's like a badge of honor.
Infamously known to be sort of cold-ish in like interviews, like sort of thing, like in those kinds of settings. So, which is kind of fair enough. I mean, it's a weird system. Like, this whole idea of like, let's go sell the movie and do these like big press conferences and junkets and, tire yourself out over and over again. And it's rough. I definitely heard, in I think a very recent episode, Roland Emmerich sort of like warm up to, the kind of whole, let's open it up to, more nerdy technical discussions. So that was awesome. Okay, I don't even know if I need to ask this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I think I can probably guess your favorite guest. I don't want you to pick favorites, but I'm going to just go ahead and put one in your head, and I think it's going to be Kevin Feige, surely, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, Feige was incredible, but he's not traditionally a guest. I mean, he counts, but like, I did him for a one-on-one for Far From Home, and then we just ran it on the show. Yeah. So if I'm going to stay in that ballpark, like getting the Russos, the weekend that Endgame came out is pretty great.
That was an event move. Yeah.
That like, and that's a lot of that was tied to the fact that they love Kevin, like they're just huge fans of Kevin and his interview style. And
how
so
could you not be?
He's infectious. He is definitely infectious. And they agreed to come to his station to do, they were making a couple of city tour. And when they knew they were going to be in Washington, D.C., and they were doing a screening of Endgame at the IMAX, at the Smithsonian IMAX, which is one of those massive screens at the Smithsonian Museums in Washington, D.C. And then they agreed to come on a show. And then they said, they would do the podcast in addition to that. And so we got them the weekend after it opened, and we were the first people to talk spoilers with them for that movie. So yeah, that's up there. Feige, anytime I get any time to speak with him is fantastic. And he's the master of the game. Like you're constantly that's a dance unlike any other dance of trying to get him to talk and not talk.
I don't love asking, like, what was it like, blah, blah, blah. But man, like this one was worth it. Like what was it like meeting God himself? Because I mean, that's going to be divine, man.
He's so disarming in the fact that he's such a nice guy. He's as down to earth and, and approachable in a weird sort of way, because he is by definition a nerd like we are, he's just in charge of the nerdiest kingdom. But like you go into the room and he stands up and he comes over and shakes your hand and complimented my Spider-Man shirt that I was wearing. And he just wants to talk Marvel, So if you're sitting across, if you're sitting across from him and you can hold your own in a Marvel conversation, then he respects you and he just wants to keep geeking out with you. So
you got to love the humbleness. I mean, surely you'd know that you're the biggest producer working today. And just to be able to keep a level head and not go in and not be a douchebag. I mean, that's exactly. It's so respectful, man. That's so great.
I know. I do love him.
So look, we had you on here to talk about your first book, Release the Snyder Cut, which, by the way, I loved. It was awesome.
Hey,
fantastic.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And kind of a prompting question here. As it was your first book, did the reception to that book meet or exceed your expectations, or were you disappointed in any way? Like what when you, I kind of want to do a bit of a post-mortem sort of thing.
Yeah. Far exceeded my expectations. And
awesome.
I had no clue what to expect. I didn't know the book publishing world is so different from internet publishing on every level. It takes so much longer. And I don't mean to write, but I mean to like, once you turn it in, you wait for it to get published. You know, it goes through a long period of time where there, of course, the copy editing and the layout of the book, but the way that books are pre-announced almost a year in advance by the publisher, and then, you know, release dates are given, and then you're kind of just hovering, waiting. And the weird thing about the Snyder Cut book was that there was so much happening with the cut of the movie, like as the book was coming, that they were almost like racing towards a finish line together at the same time. So, you mentioned,
so they sped up. So the publisher sped up, or you know, they were kind of like prompted because they wanted to sort of. They saw an opportunity for maximum sales while the movie was getting released. Was that?
I wish that was the case, but no, because, you know, at the time, COVID was really screwing everything up as well too. Just in terms of production, physical production of books, like the pipeline of all these different books going through the mass distribution system was getting clogged up, and it was delaying my release. I think the original release for the book was February 15th, and it ended up becoming March 1st. Mm-hmm. And it probably would have been later if my publishers, thank God, weren't so adamant about like, hey, we can't go that much later on this because this movie's coming, you know. Yeah. But when they lit the book and they liked the idea, they didn't know that the movie was coming at that point.
Yeah.
So it was, you mentioned lightning in a bottle, you know, it really was those two projects coming together at the same time. But even still, we were not really, we almost missed the mark because of things that were out of our hands, honestly, like situations that were out of our hands. So the reception of it, like, you know, it's really weird. Like when I tell you that I don't listen to the podcast that often, I honestly mean it.
Dude, don't worry.
I tell you that I don't go back and read my stuff on the regular basis. I don't go back and read my stuff. But with a book, it's a different animal. You know, you put a lot of time into it, and all I really wanted was for the fans of the movie and for the people who were part of that movement specifically to like it. I really wanted them to like it, and I've come to realize that there's an even larger audience out there who, when I was writing it, I was kind of writing it for the people in the movement, but I also in the back of my mind thought like, oh, maybe this could be an educational tool for someone who heard about the Snyder Cut but doesn't really know what it is. And so the reason why I say that it exceeded expectations is because I've heard from so many people after the fact who have said, my husband talks about, you know, Justice League or the Snyder Cut or all these things constantly. So I got him this book as a gift, and he didn't even know that it existed, and he loves it. And I just had to write you a note to tell you that, you know, he's a huge fan now. And like messages like that, right? Like it reached an audience beyond what I was anticipating, which I think is terrific. And then I still to this day get photos. You know, someone sent me a photo on social media of them in a bookstore in San Diego, which for me, I'm on the East Coast, you know, to the other side of the country. And someone's like, look, your book's in the bookstore. And I was like, that's just cool. You know, it just makes you feel good. Makes you feel good. So.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that you kind of had to cater to different, I guess, audiences, because I like my next sort of thing that I was going to bring up was that the book was really well balanced. You know, I'm a casual observer of all things. Like before the Snyder Cut actually came out, I was a casual observer. I knew I knew a bit, but not everything. Certainly not everything in the book. So, you know, while I had this like sort of baseline knowledge, the book really did sort of educate me on like the ins and outs of it. And I was really struck by how well you catered to, you know, myself who knew things already, but also potential newcomers as well. You know, people who had no idea that this was happening. I got my dad into it. You know, he read it too, because, you know, we were watching the trailers for the Snyder Cut, and I was telling him, I was like, I actually feel for this guy that made the movie. Like it's actually kind of like a tragic story, and you know, you can feel the love behind this trailer. Like that first trailer that came out with Hallelujah, and you can it's really, really moving. And once you get the context of it, everything behind all of the, like behind the scenes, you know, the unfortunate passing of his daughter, and then, you know, the raising of the money, It's actually really moving, and my dad was visibly moved too. So
it sounds like it's why I always said like. Even if you don't care a thing about comic books and superhero movies,
it's just a great
there's
human
there's
story.
A better story. Yeah, there's a better story behind all
that. So did you hear from Mr. Snyder after the book was published? Like, did you besides the Real Blend interview for the Snyder Cut, or when you had him, it might have been Army of the Dead. I can't remember, but you talked to him after it came out.
For both, we got him for both.
There you go.
He's come through. Yeah. I never got a message from Zach specifically. I got messages from his publicists that told me that he and Debbie both, because I sent them copies and they were super appreciative. And that's what
that's so awesome. That's the gold standard. That's what you want to reach.
Of course.
Yeah, totally.
At one point at the end of the Real Blend interview, this is the part that I cherish, where we thanked him so much for coming on, and how much we were so happy for him that the Snyder Cut came out, and he said, well, you wrote the book on the subject, and I was like, oh, that's it. That's all I need. That's all. I have Zach saying that. That's all I need to hear. So
that's so awesome, dude. That's such a great accomplishment. Congratulations.
That's cool. Thank you.
Okay, so don't want to spend too much time on this, but did you have any disappointments, in particular, the fandom? And I don't want to go too far down that hole because I know it's a bit, I see you sometimes battling here and there on Twitter, and I'm just like, Twitter's a tough place to be in any sort of fandom group or community. So I'm coming at it from the finale of Peacemaker. If anyone has seen that, or if you haven't seen that, there's no spoilers here. But it's quite Twitter's quite obviously divisive in the best sort of circumstance, but sometimes someone says something in what is 140 characters, and it's almost always the hottest take. So, I mean, when the book came out, what did you how did you? What were you thinking? When you saw? I mean, I don't know. Did you see anything negative? I wasn't even.
Oh yeah. Sure, of course.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's plenty of people who came at me for thinking that I was capitalizing on the movement to make money or to get clout. Those are two things that seem to be very important to people in that fandom.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I mean, listen, they're able to level whatever criticism they want at me. I find it really ridiculous because they clearly don't know what a first-time author makes. Someone who's writing a nonfiction book in paperback.
Live from the Bahamas, Sean O'Connell.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So the idea that I dedicated 18 months of my life for the money that I got for the book is funny. And the idea of clout, I don't even know what clout is. It's not because I wrote a Snyder Cut book, it hasn't opened any doors for me necessarily that CinemaBlend wouldn't, in any other way or shape or form. The only people who really tend to bother me are people who took words and twisted them out of context, to reflect something that I didn't say, or didn't mean in any way, shape, or form. And they'll say stuff like, "Oh, you were never a Snyder Cut fan, or you were never a Snyder fan, so you shouldn't have been the one to write the book." Which my response is always then you should have, what, there's nothing stopping you from writing the book in the first place. And I didn't get into that story because I was a rabid Snyder fan. And I think that impartiality almost helped me to tell the story because I told it from different angles, and I told it from the angle that was most interesting to me, which was, what happened to the cut, what happened to the movie, all the stuff with Zach's personal side, the fight of the people within the movement to get to it, and then the end result. I always thought that was a good story, whether you're a fan of Zach or not.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to change my opinions. I think Zach has made some excellent films. I think Zach has made some terrible films. There are people who will defend everything he does, from start to finish, and they're allowed. They could do that. That's totally fine. Where they tend to lose me, or where I guess I lost them, is that there is that section of the fandom that's just going to blindly follow everything Snyder, no matter what. And so when I continued to sort of talk to them from a business perspective of, you guys need to be really happy that you got the one movie that you got, because Warner Brothers is not really going to give you anything else. They didn't even want to give you this, So the idea of like restore the Snyderverse, it was like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And then even that, like, I can't say it's never going to happen, because there's always the 1% chance that something's going to happen.
Do you think it was kind of like a give an inch, take a mile sort of situation? Or
100%. Yeah, it was. And nobody wants to hear, that the thing that they really want is going to happen. So, I was the bearer of bad news. So I was surprised at how quickly a portion of the fan base rapidly went from "thank you for telling our story" to "how dare you tell our story."
Yeah.
But, anytime I stepped back from it and then absorbed all the other positive comments and the more rational comments, I was like, oh, that's right. It's a pretty small faction of that fan base who really just needs something to be mad about, which is what social media is. Yeah. That's what Twitter is largely.
Exactly. Yeah.
But look, I'm human, anytime that there are going to be times when they say certain things where I'm just like, well, that's just bullshit. Like, I got to step in. You should ignore it. I should be above it. But there's certain times where I read something where it's just like, that's so wrong, that I have to sort of chime in. And then that's what they largely want you to do. They want you to chime in because they're just looking for an audience.
Yes. A lot of it is very, very prompting. Like it's very, very fuel to the fire. Let me write one sentence and see what response I kind of get. But dude, I think you did a phenomenal job with the book. And we'll see how Twitter goes when Rebel Moon comes out.
Well, and I'll be totally honest with you. There are at least 3 or 4 times when it's just been Saturday morning and I've had nothing else to do. And I'm like, I'm just going to say something pretty controversial today to get the Snyder Cut fan base riled up. And so it'll say something really impartial of just like, I can't even think of an example, but there's absolutely been time, and it's been prompted by something, like there's been some bit of news. I'm trying to think of a good example. I'm trying to think of a really good example. Like recently with James Gunn, getting to have the Justice League featured. And so I'll tweet something like, well, I guess it's the Gunverse now, and I just know that that's going to get underneath someone's skin because I'm petty. I'm not afraid to say that I'm petty. I know there's certain people reading my feed out there and don't want to see everything.
It's entertaining as well, right? I mean, it's like fast food. Like, it's easy to do. it's entertaining while it's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
But all right, look, let's talk about Spidey. This is the reason why you're here. Other than just because you obviously want to speak to me.
Okay. Anytime.
So look, man, your new book is called With Great Power. It's such an awesome title. When you announced that title, I was like, damn, that's an awesome fucking title, man.
Listen, I think that 80% of this book moving forward was because I landed on that title, and I was just like, oh, that's really good. I really should write that book. Yeah, I kind of should. I kind of talked myself into it with that title.
Look, man. So Spidey's history is so incredibly rich that you can probably write like volumes and volumes of books about the character's background. And I know Spider-Man means a lot to you. So for you personally, what exactly appeals to you about the character over any other hero? I mean, Batman, like, specifically means a lot to other people. I know to Kevin Smith, I mean, like, the guy's got his own podcast about Batman. So, I mean, but
named his daughter Harley Quinn.
I know, how gorgeous is it? But I mean, like, to you, why is it Spider-Man?
I mean, it's a great question because I've put a lot of thought into it recently, and then I don't, from the earliest age when I read his books, it was probably his humor, like his sarcasm. And just the design, like there's something primal about his design, like his suit design and the color scheme of it, his rogues gallery being one of the most interesting ones. Yeah. I mean, I loved those sort of classic Vulture, Dr. Octopus, back from the earliest days, the run of Norman Osborn, when he was just like the Green Goblin, and the back and forth between them finding out each other's identities, like all those early stories were terrific to me. So, at the heart of it, and this is what I found out from a lot of people who put those stories together, it's the relatability. It's honestly, that when you read those stories, you see a bit of you, inside, or if not you, then a component of him that you want to aspire to be like, always doing the right thing when it's really, really hard. And I think a lot of those early stories were written so well, of putting authentic obstacles in his way. They're not far-fetched stories. And it's not a superpowered alien from another planet, or the billionaire Bruce Wayne. It's a kid. It's a teenager from New York, where I'm from originally. But none of that stuff was the reason why I was picking up those books on a regular basis as a kid. I just loved the stories. Yeah. And I loved his personality, and I thought he was funny, in ways that the other Marvel superheroes weren't necessarily. And so that's what kept me coming back. And so, so I've been a huge fan since I was a kid, collecting all of his books. And in the run up to the Raimi films, like I remember being more excited for a film than I ever was before, to finally see him, on the big screen, and finally getting his chance to be in a movie. And then, his evolution from that point on has been fascinating to me.
That's so awesome. I mean, like, he definitely does strike like that unique sort of blend of, like, normal human being, normal child. I mean, but also superpowered craziness that you just want to see unfold on the screen or on the page. You kind of touched on to my next question, which, by the way, does that happen to you when you interview people, when a guest answers a previous question and you're just like, God damn it, scratch that off the list?
Yeah, and that's why sometimes when we're doing the Real Blend deal and somebody we've mapped out our questions and somebody gives an answer, and then if you look, there's a lot of times when we're like reaching down and kind of texting each other. If you watch the YouTube thing, and I'm like, I'm going to shift to this, or, Jake, go here kind of thing, because they've dropped a bomb in the middle of the thing. So that does happen. Well,
it's happened to me a couple times. It just happened. But I mean, look, I'm just going to go through it anyway. But I mean,
sure.
So look, the main gist of our show here on the podcast is basically, we pick a movie every fortnight. We sit down and we talk about the movie somewhat scene by scene. We kind of laugh at the things that are hilarious, whatever. We recently covered the first Raimi movie. Okay. And I was 9 when that movie came out. And, I came to it after the fact when the VHS came out. It was gifted to me at Christmas. And I was like, they made a Spider-Man movie? This is awesome. But, what was specifically for you, again, you already touched on it, but what was the feeling for you way back in 2002 to finally see this character realized by a filmmaker who loved him just as much as you did? Because Raimi is a household name to us now, but even back then, he was extremely well known after the Evil Dead movies and Darkman and things like that. So,
yeah, I was. So I was already reviewing films because I started reviewing movies for publications in '99. Awesome. So 2002, I was writing reviews for a publication down here. And I was harder on that film than I probably should have been, right? Because I think that I was like a fanatic, that wanted things done a certain way. Mm-hmm. So I'll always remember that my initial reaction to that movie was, it's good. It's not great. It could have been better. The goblin mask sucked, the hard shell goblin mask. I was really bothered by the fact that he put Mary Jane in the Gwen Stacy story.
Yeah.
I'm still annoyed by that. That's still a bone of contention for me of why they did it. And getting a chance to interview David Koepp for the new book. He had a screenplay, that would have been next. And it was called The Amazing Spider-Man, oddly enough. And it would have introduced Gwen. And he explained to me that the reason he put Mary Jane on that bridge in the first movie is because he would have carried out the Gwen Stacy death in the third part of his trilogy, but it would have been Harry as the Goblin, and Harry would have knocked her off. Oh. So he thought that would have been a carryover, like he was teasing it in one and he would have paid it off in three.
Right. That's badass.
And he never got a chance to. So because he didn't get a chance to me, it's always weird that Mary Jane is part of the Gwen Stacy, on top of a bridge getting knocked off. Because then I always thought well, they should have killed her. If you're going to put her up there, you kill her.
Mm-hmm.
In the second movie, that gives Peter motivation for not wanting to be the character.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can feed into Spider-Man no more, and it gives you a more emotional reason for him giving up on the character. And then you redeem him in the third one, so I was already projecting all these other things that I wanted the movie to be, because I'm broken in the head like that. But now I've come to realize that, like, what Raimi put together is pretty impossible, because we've seen a lot of origin stories come around that botch the source material. And honestly, he did an incredible job at bringing Amazing Fantasy 15 to life and bringing,
And when there was no template for it,
right.
barely any template for it. The guy was like making it up. I'm not saying as he went along, but I mean, he wasn't particularly copying anything that's come before.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah. And I mean, Toby might not have been my first choice at the time. I think he's perfectly great in it now.
Yeah.
But at the time, I'm sure I wanted somebody different.
Even as kids, my brother and I were a little lukewarm to Toby. It was. I think it was just the mopiness a little.
There's that for sure.
Yeah.
But the suit is gorgeous,
oh.
and visual effects, were really trying to find their way forward in that movie, and they're pretty great for 2002.
Totally.
To make the act of Spider-Man swinging, like the final swing is tremendous, and landing on the flagpole is great. And it got a lot right.
Yeah.
It got a lot right. It got a couple of things wrong that bothered me, but that's kind of where I stand.
Elfman's score is gorgeous. Yeah.
It is fantastic.
It's awesome. One of the characters that my co-host and I, Colin, laughed about in that first movie was that teacher who's the same age as them in the opening, and he's always whispering. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I just this is one of those actors who gets cast in like a big movie, has a tiny bit role, and just goes for broke.
Yeah.
But he's just so memorable to me, so I guess he did his job.
That's funny. And the scene too that resonates with me really well early on is the Flash Thompson scene.
Yes, Joe Manganiello.
Joe Manganiello, and it showed the spider sense in a way that like I'd never seen visualized before.
The Fly,
Spitball. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And even like the way Toby, like the punch goes and he around, like he's
reels
moving
around
at a different speed. That's Raimi's a genius.
God, I'm so excited for Multiverse of Madness, man.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
So look, since that first Raimi movie, the Spider movies, they've mostly ranged from okay to amazing, pun intended. Was it frustrating for you to, see the constant changing of the guard behind the camera, and is exploring that one of the reasons for With Great Power being written? I mean, you've got from Raimi to Mark Webb to obviously John Watts now, but I mean, even behind that as well, Avi Arad and now Kevin Feige. So what, because you've seen this as an adult sort of happen, you're in the industry as well, you're covering it, so you're seeing this changing of the hands all the time, and it's actually as an audience member, it was a little frustrating. I remember walking out of Amazing Spider-Man 2 and not loving that movie, but I mean, hearing about, we're going to kind of scrap this sort of setup that we've done in this movie.
Yeah.
How did you, what were your feelings?
Honestly, I'm of the mindset that a new director isn't a problem every time, and bringing in a fresh voice, because over the course of writing the book, you come to realize that because they often do these movies back to back, by the time they got to the third Raimi film, Raimi was just burned out, and there was a little bit more time between 2 and 3, but still, there's a lot of pressure to follow up the success of 2. And same thing with Mark Webb, Mark delivered his first movie. Had they handed the reins to a second person, to sort of take over and go in a different direction, or maybe try to deliver what the studio was looking for, maybe it would have worked better. Who's to say? Right. Look at, across the street, I think Logan is the best Wolverine story ever told. Right. And it was James Mangold's first and only time, Oh, no. He did the Wolverine. That's right. I'm sorry.
Yes, he did.
He did the Wolverine. Yep. But that's another example of someone who's like Bryan Singer shouldn't direct everything done by the X-Men. Bring a new person in. And that has nothing to do with Bryan Singer. It's just bringing a new voice. People get creatively stale. So I'm okay with new voices coming in. And I hope that when the new trilogy of Spider-Man movies come along, I'd like to see another filmmaker give a shot at them. Because I'm just really happy to see more Spider-Man necessarily. Use Venom as an example. Andy Serkis was a different shift from what Ruben Fleischer set up. And a lot of people seem to really respond to that. It's not that the changing of the guard of the Spider-Man franchises propelled me to write this story. It was the fact that was a small component of all of the changes that were happening in the comic book genre in general.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I thought it was fascinating that Sony owned this extremely successful character who should have been part of a larger universe that was being built at another studio. And the years of when Marvel and Disney couldn't use them at all, and how unusual that was to have. And Kevin talked about it in our Far From Home interview of just like, he goes, now after they made the deal, now Marvel finally has what Star Wars has always had and what Harry Potter has always had, which is access to all of their characters. Like imagine if they had a Harry Potter franchise, but a different studio owned Hermione. How would you make the stories? You couldn't do it. And so that was always really fascinating to me. But I was also at a time when all the different studios were trying to figure out how to make superhero movies stick. And as Marvel was succeeding, and the other studios were trying and not succeeding. And I really was fascinated by the evolution of Spider-Man as a character from the production standpoint. Like, how do you make him look believable from the page to the screen? How do you take what's working and keep building on it? What happened to the Raimi franchise? Like, why did it fall apart? How did Mark reinvent it? And then what happened to his movie so quickly? When it shifted over to Marvel and Marvel finally got their first shot at it, what were the decisions that they were making?
Yeah.
To make sure that they didn't make the same mistakes. At all of those pit stops, there's fascinating stories to break down and explore. And you can get into the directors and you can get into the different screenwriters and you can get into the heads of the actors who had to try to do it. And I found all of that to be really, really interesting, beyond the fact that before you get to the first Raimi one, there's 1,000 more fascinating stories about people who tried to get Spider-Man off the ground and couldn't for different reasons. So,
Cameron?
What does that ring a bell? James Cameron was one of them too. And I actually got to interview James Cameron
for
the book, which is
that's so
which is
awesome.
Ridiculously insane to say that that's an actual statement.
Another pinch me moment, dude. That's crazy.
Happened. Yeah, that's stupid. That's just stupid. But what separates this book, I think, from the Snyder Cut story is that the Snyder Cut was really, really focused on that Justice League movie and everything that kind of happened around it. I didn't realize how the Spider-Man book, when I sort of took the approach, I bit off a lot more than I could sort of chew. And it's a lot of material. And so I hope I did it justice. I really feel like I did. And so I think people will see that when the book comes out.
That's so awesome, dude. I can't wait. So do you get into, because one of the parts that I'm a little hazy on is the selling of the character originally in the 90s. So is that like you get into that?
I break that whole thing down. Yes.
Okay, that's awesome.
From start to finish.
Educate me, Sean. Educate.
So that at all these different points who owned what. And the one thing I'll share with you and with your listeners, because this makes me sick to my stomach every single time I think about it, is that Sony had an opportunity at one point to own all of the Marvel characters, to every Marvel character before they bought Spider-Man. This was around 1999.
Wow.
Marvel was coming out of a bankruptcy. They desperately needed an infusion of cash. Sony went to them and said, "We want to buy Spider-Man." And Marvel said, "We'll do you one better. We'll give you Spider-Man and everyone else that we own. The only ones we can't give you are the X-Men and the Fantastic Four because they belong at Fox right now."
Fox, yeah. Wow.
So Captain America, Iron Man,
Can you imagine
Ghost Rider,
Thor by Sony. Well,
everybody, all of them were available. And Sony's heads, the head honchos at that time, said, nobody cares about all those characters. We just want Spider-Man. So Marvel offered them the entire catalog for $25 million, and Sony said, no, we'll take Spider-Man for 10. So they could have had all of Marvel for $25 million,
but
which
also
is a drop in the bucket now when you think about it.
It's insane. That's crazy, man. I'm so glad that's in there. Thank you so much,
John Calley. Yeah, his guy's name is John Calley. He was the head of Sony at that time, and I think it's largely his decision that he said.
It just speaks to just how far the landscape has shifted in 23 years. Like, it's
Sure.
crazy. It's insane. But I mean, even just purchasing Spider-Man for 10 million, like that is chump change.
It really is. Well, and you think about it too, and we get into a lot of this in the book as well too. What was driving all of those decisions was that Avi Arad and his partner wanted these movies to be commercials for the toys that they were creating. You know, they owned a company called Toy Biz, and they had the rights to license all of the Marvel characters without having to pay an additional licensing fee. So it was basically the ability to create all of these toys around all these characters, and they just wanted the movies. They made the movies to be commercials for the toys.
I mean, George Lucas had set the model, kind of thing, in terms of
extremely
shifting toys based on the films. And it was 99, so Phantom Menace was killing it as well. So,
but Avi cared. Avi did care about the characters, and he wasn't just going to churn out crap. Although they churned out some crap.
He cops a lot of shit, I think.
He does, and I don't think it's fair. But at the same time, that was around. Feige was an assistant. He was Avi's assistant on the first Raimi. Yeah. And he was working for Dick Donner on the first X-Men movie because Lauren Shula Donner was the producer of the first X-Men, and Feige was their assistant. And Avi, the way that Avi tells the story is that he plucked Kevin out of the Dick Donner film offices and put him to work for Raimi on the first one. So.
And history was made.
History was made.
Whenever I watch those old movies and I see Feige's name in the credits, I do the Leo DiCaprio thing from Hollywood, the whole like pointing up and So look, I think one of the most contentious, it's fair to say one of the most contentious periods of the Spidey character on film has to be during the Mark Webb, Andrew Garfield sort of period. Yeah. And I think that's also based on the fact that Twitter was also taking off and really becoming its own thing. I mean, like Twitter drives a lot of these movies and a lot of these TV shows. Unfortunately, it's not the greatest, obviously, metric, but audiences and fans were pretty divided about that particular interpretation in those two movies. Primarily because I guess there's been some evidence of maybe studio meddling. So do you get into that? Is it speculation? Like, how much of it is speculation on your part, or like how much is it fact?
No. I get accounts from people at Sony who were making the decisions at that time.
Awesome.
And again, I try to frame it of this is where we were as a superhero movie culture at the time.
Yeah.
And it really was studios trying to figure out how to mimic what Marvel was doing with the characters that they had access to. And so for, DC, it was launch Man of Steel, start to build the DC universe. And for Sony, all they had was Spider-Man. So they really tried to, with Amazing Spider-Man 2, build quickly a universe that would sustain all these other films. Yes. And they wanted to do we get into this in the book, but they had release dates announced for Amazing Spider-Man 3 and 4 before 2 even opened. They had Drew Goddard working on a Sinister Six movie. Yeah. And they had Kurtzman and Orsi were working on a Venom project. And they legitimately just put the cart before the horse. They wanted all of these things to come to fruition before people clicked with the idea of Amazing Spider-Man 2. And Amazing Spider-Man 2, it did okay. Any other movie would kill to have the box office that it had. Yeah. But by the Spider-Man standards, it was declining, and so they knew it wasn't necessarily going in that direction. So now when you step back, Sony's doing it the right way. Now, they start with a Venom movie and people like it. So you make a second one, and then you try a Morbius movie, and then you announce a Madam Web movie. You start to build this universe out. Yeah. Yeah. Kraven the Hunter, similar to the way that the MCU starts with an Iron Man movie, a Captain America movie, and a Thor movie. Right. You know, and then if people respond to it, you build on top of that. So Sony should have done that from the get-go, but they admit clearly in the book, you know, that in hindsight, they put a lot of pressure on Amazing Spider-Man 2 to deliver all of that, which is why you have the mystery of Peter's parents, and you have the launch of Harry Osborn, and you have the special projects division at Oscorp, and you have Chris Cooper playing Norman Osborn for one scene with his frozen decapitated head.
Oscar
winner,
you
have Felicia Hardy introduced. What's that?
Yeah. He's an Oscar winner too, right? So it was just like also jarring, like to see him in like one scene. But yeah, I don't know.
Paul Giamatti as a Rhino.
It is fun to visit that movie in hindsight, though. Like I thought, you know, in my rewatch before No Way Home, I thought that movie jumped at least 1.5 stars for me, man. Like I was like, damn, that's a lot of fun. Yeah.
It is unfairly maligned. You know, it's not a great movie by any standards.
Yeah,
but the things that are good in it are wonderful.
Yes. The Times Square scene is a standout for me.
The Gwen Stacy death is terrific.
It's amazing. Yeah.
It resonates because they had such great chemistry.
Totally.
I think the scene at the end where he shows up, you know, and has that interaction with the kid is fantastic.
Yeah.
You know,
and the score in that, like Hans is you got the electro score, which is that whispering, but then like even the way like that really what is it, the triumphant horns,
it's got like a brass element to
I was like, damn, this is awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
I mean, literally Feige's notes after he screened Spider-Man 2 was cut out the opening scene in the plane with the parents and start with the first scene should be him coming out of the sky, you know, with that theme.
The rippling costume. Yeah.
Dude, anytime I watch Amazing Spider-Man 2, I skip right to that. That's where I start. That's where the movie starts for me. I never need to see the parents on the plane.
It's a weird thing. I remember watching it with my dad, and he's just like, what is this? Do we put on the right movie? And I was like, because it just feels like a scene out of something else. Like it doesn't seem of the cloth.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
So I kind of wanted to ask you, it doesn't really have much to do with the book, but it kind of does. So managing time, I mean, like between your CinemaBlend and family commitments, like how do you manage time writing a book and managing deadlines? I mean, that is a lot of plates in the air.
Yeah, I've been saying this and I'll continue to say it. It was a mistake to do 2 books back to back. And it's, you know, it's the only mistake that you realize when you're in it. And then that point you're in it and you got to keep going. But it's a lot. And I have to be extremely thankful to my family for putting up with me, you know, being busy. And so lately the release has been that I don't have a book to work on, you know, and on the weekends when we have something going on, and I'll say to my wife or to the boys, you know, like, come on, let's go do something. And they'll be like, oh, you're free to go do this. And I'll say like, yes, because I don't have a book to work on right now. And it's freeing. But literally they gave me all the time that I needed. And it was nights and weekends and it was everything, you know, like, but part of this is, you know, that's just the way my brain works. I need to be constantly thinking about or working on something. And so it's good for me to have that. Like it's good for me to have a project that I'm constantly sort of tinkering with. And that's why, you know, I have ideas for a 3rd book that I'm tinkering with, but the difference this time out is that I'm waiting and making sure that it's way more formed before I commit to anything. But yeah, man, it's just, you know, it's easier. It's a little easier now. I have 2 boys. They're both older. They're both doing their own thing. They don't need me to be, you know, as hands-on as I would have been if they were younger. Yeah, I don't know, that they're very understanding and very, very appreciative. I'm very appreciative that they give me the amount of time that they do to work on this stuff.
That's awesome. It's important to have a robust support system. So I'm glad you're
for sure. Yeah, you couldn't do it without, honestly. It would be impossible to do it without the support of the people who are in your day-to-day life.
Totally. And
they, you know, they'll turn around and say, my wife more than the boys. The boys don't really even, you know, I'm like, I wrote a book, and they're like, that's cool. They don't really, but Michelle is really blown away and super supportive of the fact that she'll hold the book up and she'll be like, you turn this out, like there was nothing. And then you had an idea and then it became this. And I'm like, I know, it's bizarre.
It's awesome, dude. It's a great achievement. And you've done such a great job with the book that I've read, at least. And I can't wait for With Great Power. You've gushed about No Way Home on Real Blend. But I mean, we can't be sitting here 2 months after No Way Home and not talk about it, at least.
Yeah, let's go.
Dude, what was your face like? That's I don't have a set question for this. It was just all I have in my notes is No Way Home.
Yeah. My story with No Way Home is really unique.
Yes. Tell the audience about this.
Should I tell? Yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell a couple of just quick versions of it. The one thing that really stands out about all of this is the fact that like it's happening again. That I decided to write a book about the Snyder Cut, and then the Snyder Cut gets released. It's bizarre, right? Like that, the way that those two lined up. So then, months later, I decided to write a story about the history of Spider-Man on film. And then a movie comes along that reunites the 3 generations of Spider-Man. Like, I'm having a hard time swallowing that, like accepting that reality. So here's this movie coming, and for the, months leading up to the release of it, like it's everything. It's the conclusion of this story that I've been putting together for 2 years. So the movie has a tremendous amount of weight of expectation for me on it. I can't even imagine what it had to be in order to live up to what I needed it to be. So so here's the story. Yeah. So I get invited to the the world premiere of it out in Los Angeles. And it was, you're constantly sort of bartering for first, an invitation to go to it. But then at the same time, I was trying to juggle a bunch of different interviews that I needed, first for CinemaBlend and secondly for the book. Who's going to be available? They're suddenly doing press. Who could I get? Who's going to talk? How am I going to get out to Los Angeles? COVID's still screwing everything up. Are we going to be able to travel? Where am I going to stay? All these different things. And then I end up getting COVID the week that the premiere is happening. And I'm supposed to leave on Saturday, and I test positive on Friday, which shut the whole thing down. And
when you tweeted that, my heart broke. My heart broke for you, man.
Yeah. The universe is going to kick you in the teeth every once in a while. No. And but like my attitude always tends to be like, I'm waiting for that other shoe to drop. So when it drops, I always kind of just go like, oh, that's pretty funny. I got screwed out of that. You listen, dude, I'm playing with house money. Like we joke about this all the time. Like the amount of things that we've been able to do in our careers and our lives. Like if you miss out on something, you have to just shrug your shoulders and say, all right, that's fine. I've done plenty.
I'll be at the next one. Right. Because these things always roll around. Yeah,
exactly. But in terms of reacting to the movie, the first time through, I was numb, but I just couldn't even process what was happening. And it really was the second time. So I went on Thursday in the afternoon just to avoid spoilers, the first day it opened. And then we had tickets to go back Friday night to an IMAX with a packed theater. And it was that screening that I'm always going to remember, because that's when I realized like, I knew everything that had happened. I processed it, and now I'm able to really let it wash over me. And so, Andrew showing up for the first time and the crowd going nuts, and Toby showing up, and then them confronting Tom on the rooftop. And
it's like arena like you're watching it in an arena. It's amazing. Yeah.
But then even like, little things that I appreciate in the final battle, just stupid nerdy things of like, oh, cool, Toby got to fight the lizard, for a brief amount of time. Or, oh, that's amazing. Like Tom actually got to fight the Sandman. Like, that's so cool. Like things you never dreamed that you would get to see is fantastic. And, the final 30 seconds of that movie are literally my favorite 30 seconds in the MCU of him on his own, with a homemade suit swinging out over the city. It's perfection. It's a perfect way to end that movie.
It was. They absolutely spoiled us. I mean, it was. I don't know where they go from here in terms of escalation. My next question is, what are your thoughts on Doctor Strange? I mean, like this new movie that's coming up. There's so many theories out there. I'm not a big theorizer. I don't particularly jump on the Tom Cruise is in this movie like train. But I mean, my whole question with this Phase 4, we're in Phase 4. Phase 4 lineup is kind of like, Black Widow gave us this movie. Okay, that's great. It's been overdue for a while. Eternals, I really love the Eternals. I connected with it very much. But I mean, like these are like those were sort of like stories that we knew sort of were coming. Eternals gave us a pretty good story. But like, I mean, Spider-Man 3 and now Doctor Strange, the sequel, need to up the game of what came before. So like, my question is with Toby and Andrew, I feel like that's kind of like the pinnacle of what we could have achieved in terms of fan service, for lack of a better term. So,
sure,
where do we go from here in terms of escalation? Like, I mean, and where does the buck stop? I mean, when do you reach the point of we literally cannot give you any more?
It's a terrific question. I think it's maybe a Secret Wars.
Yeah.
Where you figure out how to get everyone together. Because if you think about it, like the Spider-Man was able to pull that off because it had a rich history.
Yes.
Like Thor Love and Thunder is going to do anything that reaches the nostalgia factor for that. The Guardians 3 is not going to do anything that reaches that level. Spider-Man had a rich 20-year history. So, the next thing that I think can get close to that, like I'm a little concerned about Into the Multiverse of Madness, because is it going to be a little too overstuffed?
Yes,
but I can go into it without the emotional attachment that I would have had to Spider-Man. Like I can just go in and watch him throw everything against the wall and say, "Cool, let's see what sticks," sort of thing. So a Secret Wars title, a Secret Wars project that brings everyone back, or figures out a way to juggle them. I mean, is it going to be that much different than the conclusion of Endgame? I'm not sure, but you're right. It's a terrific question, and it's a really big challenge that I think Marvel does have of how do they continuously top themselves. Now, do I believe that Feige will figure out a way to do it? Yeah, I do. You know, but because there's other villains that they could get to. Like Kang the Conqueror has a lot of potential, and putting Jonathan Majors in that part is really, really exciting. They haven't scratched the surface of Doom. Doom could be a villain that lasts for years upon years if they do him right.
True. I didn't even think about Doom, man. Jesus.
I mean, there's still plenty out there. There's still plenty out
Galactus, there. If they go that route too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, I saw the trailer for Doctor Strange, and I'm hearing like Patrick Stewart's voice, and I'm just like, damn, like they're attempting to outdo Spider-Man's cameos, well, not extended cameos again. And I'm just like, damn, like how are they going to keep doing this? Like, are they going to reach a point of like no return of like, this is now what the audience expects? So,
right.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, like, yes, they could do it with the X-Men to a certain extent, but they almost did already. Like Days of Future Past was a thing.
Yeah. I love that.
So it's great, and it was great for what that franchise needed at that time. So, it's interesting because the next few projects that they have lined up don't seem to have connections to each other. Like they have Blade, they have Thor, they have Guardians, they have Black Panther, they have a Captain Marvel movie, and they seem like standalone. They're almost like phase 2 sequels,
Right.
They're traditional sequels, but what are they building towards? I don't know the answer yet. I'm sure they do. But I don't know what the answer is.
I'm wondering if, like, in Black Panther, they get another character to show up, much like, one that shows up, has a huge part in Doctor Strange. So it might just be something that we don't even know yet. But, like, I mean, it's interesting to think about. But look, I'm super excited for Doctor Strange. I mean, if like Raimi gets me excited, I'm keen to see what he does with it. And I think it would be a missed opportunity if Toby doesn't show up, if he doesn't get a direct Toby again. I don't jump on the speculation train at all. I'm just saying I think that might be a missed opportunity. I won't be disappointed if it doesn't happen, but that would be pretty awesome.
Well, it'd be fairly easy to do if, from this instance, Doctor Strange sent them back, right, at the end of their thing. Like, if he somehow sent Toby back to wherever, to some sort of multiverse portal that opens, and it's in his sequel.
Love that.
You could do that.
Love that.
You could do that.
So look, Sean, we're gonna wrap up. You already mentioned in terms of planning for the future, you want to give a bit more time between books. What do you see yourself doing in terms of subject matter for the next book? I mean, I know you've started planning. You're in the planning phase, so don't tell me everything. Don't tell me whatever spoiler thoughts, whatever you have. But
sure. Yeah. Well, I definitely don't want to commit to anything too.
For sure. Yeah.
Because I've got a couple of different ideas. Some of them are in the comic book superhero movie corner, because there's still plenty of field to till there. I'm more sort of gravitating towards an idea that is unrelated to comic book superhero films. Still a movie book, but a little bit more analytical about a larger topic. And I won't tell you what it is, but I will say that as I've come up with these different ideas, the Real Blend boys are my sounding board, basically. And I'm always shooting them texts of like, is this interesting? What do you guys, and when I shot them the last one, Jake's response was like, I will hate you if you don't write this book, kind of thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So like in all caps, he wrote back and he was like, you are writing that book. And I was like, all right. But it's a big topic. And so what I'm using this time to do now is kind of whittle it down to figure out like, what is it? Like I gave them the elevator pitch basically, and they were enthusiastic. And so now I'm trying to figure out what it is.
That's awesome, man.
But in addition, it has a title, because I think what sold Jake is like, I gave him the title and he was like, you're writing that book.
Is it a pun?
But I don't know. Like, I don't know. But the publishers that I work with, they might not want it. I don't know. Who knows?
So do you need to like pitch it? Like, I mean, how like people like pitch TV shows and stuff like that? Like, is that what you need to do?
It's easier now that they know who I am, and and they know that I can write, that I'm able to write. Like the first time through, you're pitching yourself completely as a non-entity.
Mm-hmm. New York Times bestseller author Sean Nicole.
Yeah. I mean, they have said that the Snyder Cut book was one of their best-selling titles from last year, and
That's
they
awesome.
seem very excited for the Spider-Man one. So I hope that it continues to keep the door open, for them to ask me to write more stuff, because I definitely do want to keep writing books. I really enjoy it. I just need to not do it right away. I just need to not do
it. All in your own time, man. I mean, like, I love your books. You definitely have built an amazing fan base. And
thank you.
Absolutely, keep writing. I mean, the flow of release of Snyder Cut was amazing, and your writing style. I read everything in your voice.
That's funny.
Like I can't not do that, but it was fantastic. So
thank you, sir.
Last question before we do get you out of here. So I ask all my guests, and you've answered this before, so I'll give you the answer. Perfect double feature that has to be on the big screen. Last time you were on the show, you answered La La Land and Gravity. Is that still your answer?
No,
Ooh,
I'll change it.
nice.
Why did I say that? I wonder.
I don't know. I mean, like both of them are A+ films.
Do you remember my reasoning for it?
Can't remember. I can't remember. I think you wanted something sort of lighter, and then you went a little bit more serious with Gravity.
Okay.
But I mean, like La La Land's also got its fair share of drama, so I don't know.
It does. Okay, hold on. Give me a minute, because I want to think about this for a second.
No, good. Mine is Jaws and Jurassic Park. I mean, that double Spielberg sort of creature feature.
That's pretty great.
Yeah,
that's pretty great.
And it's kind of cliche. Like that plays in theaters all the time. That double feature. So,
okay, I think I have to say. Hold on, I know it.
Love putting guests on the spot. This is what we do.
No, it's such a good, like, it's so much fun being able to program this, and you can almost go any different direction. All right, I'm gonna say for this reason, Ghostbusters and Gremlins.
Ooh, nice.
Because I'm fairly sure they came out the same week in 1984.
That was a big week, if memory serves.
If it's not the same week, they're like within a week of each other. But I think those two movies came out in the same week.
Yeah.
And they are pivotal to, my childhood kind of thing.
That's awesome. Dante and Reitman,
because of that, because of the uniqueness of them opening on the same day or same week, I'll pick those two.
That's a fantastic pick. That's awesome.
Also, to the great Ivan Reitman, also too.
Yes, I heard you guys eulogize him on the last episode. Rest in peace, man. I mean, like, the guy was seminal. So, like, that's and then what a way to see your son, give pretty much make a love letter to all your filmography,
right?
And see the world embrace it as well before you do pass away. I mean, it's bittersweet. So yeah,
it is for sure.
But look, Sean, thank you so much for coming, man. The book is out November 2022. Is that still right? November?
Correct. Yes, November 1st, and it's up for pre-order now at Amazon.
Yes, I'll post the link in the show notes.
Terrific,
for sure. Yeah, I'm gonna jump on it, man. I'm so excited for your book. And look, Real Blend is a huge staple in my daily life. I love going on walks, or even at the gym, just listening to you guys talk about movies. You guys are so passionate. It's incredibly, to use your words, infectious. And sign up for Real Blend Premium because, I mean, not only are you supporting you guys doing what you do, but you absolutely get great, and I don't love this word, but content. You absolutely do get great content out of it. So it's awesome. And again, man, thank you so much for joining us here on the show. This is an absolute blast. Everyone knows how much this means to me. So
it's my pleasure, dude. I had a lot of fun. Great questions.
Thanks, man. But look, I'll post the show the link in the show notes. I'll also post a link to Real Blend as well. Like, you guys need the help. But
hey, listen, new audience members all the time. I love it.
For sure. All right, Sean, catch you later. I'm gonna
take care.
This